No, Lois, I'm very sorry. I have another pair in my office.
Well, I better get them for you. I'll meet you at the studio.
The man who once could have been the face that every kid looked up to, strong, brave, and full of charm, was George Reeves, the actor who brought Superman to life on screen in a way that made people believe heroes were real. He wasn't just an actor. To many, he was Superman. Yet, the most tragic part of his story came in 1959 when he died suddenly. His funeral wasn't the grand farewell fans had imagined. The crowds never came. The cameras were missing. Hollywood remained silent. Only a small group of people showed up to say goodbye. It was quiet, too quiet, for someone so beloved. How could the man who had inspired millions end up with such a lonely farewell? Was it simply bad timing, or were there darker, unknown reasons that people kept their distance? What truly became of the man behind the cape? And more importantly, why did the world reject Superman when he needed them the most? George Reeves, the original Superman, was born on January 5, 1914, in Woolstock, Iowa. He entered the world as George Kiefer Brewer. Unfortunately, his parents separated soon after his birth, and he spent much of his childhood moving around with his mother, first in Kentucky, then Illinois, and finally settling in California. His mother Helen eventually married Frank Besselo, who adopted George and gave him his last name, Besselo. But this marriage, too, didn't last. Helen later told George that Frank had died, but he discovered years later that Frank was still alive. This emotional shock left a lasting impact on George, one he carried for many years. Despite the emotional turmoil, George found joy in the performing arts. He participated in school productions, both as a singer and actor. After high school, he attended Pasadena Junior College and then studied at the prestigious Pasadena Playhouse, where he also met Eleanora Needles, whom he married in 1940. Their marriage lasted a decade before ending in divorce in 1950. George's big break came in 1939 with a small role in Gone with the Wind. Though minor, it helped him get noticed, leading to a contract with Warner Brothers and the adoption of his stage name, George Reeves. He worked steadily over the next few years, but few of his films were successful or of high quality. Later, he signed with 20th Century Fox, but that deal also didn't last. In 1942, Reeves starred in the war drama So Proudly We Hail, which inspired him to enlist in the U.S. Army in early 1943. Assigned to the Army Air Forces, he acted in and helped produce training films, and played a key role in Winged Victory, both on stage and in the movie version. After the war, George returned to Hollywood, but the film industry had changed. Roles were scarce, and Reeves accepted whatever he could find, even digging cesspools to make ends meet. Then in 1951, he was offered the role of Superman in a new television series. At first, he wasn't enthusiastic, since television was not as prestigious as film at the time. But the show became wildly popular, turning George into a household name. Yet, the success came with a price. He became so closely associated with the Superman character that casting directors couldn't see him in any other role. He was typecast. His contract also restricted him from working on other projects, which frustrated his desire to grow creatively. Despite his fame, he was paid poorly for such a demanding role. Hoping to branch out, George wrote and planned his own series titled Port of Entry, which he intended to shoot in exotic locations like Hawaii and Mexico. The concept was ambitious and exciting, but no studio wanted to fund it, so it remained unrealized. Meanwhile, the team behind Adventures of Superman struggled to find someone to replace George. Eventually, they offered him a large salary, reportedly $5,000 per week, to return, which was significant for a show that filmed only a few weeks a year. George accepted the offer, though it was a decision made more out of financial necessity than passion. In 1959, preparations for the new season were underway. Costumes were being updated, scripts were in development, and the cast was ready. Though George, now 45, had doubts about continuing as Superman, he was set to begin filming. But then, tragedy struck. Before production began, George Reeves was found dead. The entertainment world was stunned. The cheerful, smiling Superman that millions adored was gone, and under mysterious circumstances. From the start, speculation surrounded his death. Some believed it was suicide, others insisted it was murder. The rumors have never fully ceased. His death came at a time when he was hoping for a fresh start. By 1958, his professional and personal lives were in turmoil. He had just ended a long relationship with Toni Mannix, wife of powerful MGM executive Eddie Mannix. Soon after, he got engaged to Leonore Lemon, a high-society socialite with a wild personality. They were reportedly planning a wedding on June 19, 1959, followed by a honeymoon in Tijuana. On the surface, George appeared hopeful about starting a new chapter. But behind closed doors, he was dealing with significant financial struggles, something he confided in friends and even his mother. Despite his fame, his income was far lower than most assumed. With limited filming schedules and poor pay from Superman, he was barely making ends meet. Still, George remained optimistic. A possible revival of Adventures of Superman offered a glimmer of hope. He also had plans to shift into directing, with the support of Lois Lane actress Phyllis Coates. George believed this new venture could free him from being forever identified as Superman. Unfortunately, he couldn't secure funding, and the project never materialized. Other opportunities did come his way, but they were all related to Superman. A live Superman stage show was scheduled for July, and there was talk of an Australian tour. These offers, though financially helpful, reminded George that he couldn't escape the Cape. At 45, he was stuck between not being famous enough to evolve, yet still trapped in a role he could no longer bear. The public adored him as Superman, but George Reeves longed to be more. George was an ambitious man, but his situation was far more complex than most realized. The weight of being Superman, the constant rejection from Hollywood, and unfulfilled dreams all began to take a toll on his mental health. He was emotionally exhausted. And yet, despite all of this, people who knew him best always spoke highly of his character. George Reeves may have died under tragic circumstances, but to those who loved him, he was always more than just a hero on the screen. He was the man behind the cape. Stories about George Reeves' good nature, humility, and respectful demeanor were plentiful among those who worked with him. Unlike many in the entertainment industry, he was not egotistical. To his co-stars and crew, he wasn't just Superman on screen. He was a genuinely kind man off camera as well. A sign on his dressing room read, "Honest George, the people's friend," a nickname that perfectly captured his essence. George treated everyone at the studio with warmth and kindness, from business executives to janitors. He was especially gentle and attentive with children, who idolized him as Superman. He took that responsibility seriously and never treated it as just a role. While promoting the show in the southern U.S., George was honored with the title of Kentucky Colonel, a humorous yet heartfelt gesture. When he returned, his dressing room sign had been changed to read, "Honest George," also known as Colonel Reeves. That small change reflected not just appreciation, but George's own desire to be seen as more than a man in a cape. Despite struggles in his later career, his good character left a lasting impression on all who knew him. To those close to him, George wasn't just a TV icon, he was a true friend and role model. George lived like a real-life superhero, especially mindful of how children looked up to him. Though he smoked in private, he made sure never to do so in front of kids or cameras and eventually quit altogether to protect his image as a role model. He kept his personal life discreet to avoid negative publicity that might impact young fans. During public events, George was always approachable and gracious, particularly with children who saw him as their hero. Beyond his on-screen persona, he also took up meaningful causes, becoming the national chairman for the Myasthenia Gravis Foundation in 1955 to help raise awareness and funds for the disease. His commitment to using his fame for good made him a true inspiration, both on and off screen. But on the night of June 16, 1959, tragedy struck. George Reeves was found dead in his bedroom in Benedict Canyon, Los Angeles, from a gunshot wound to the head. He was only 45. His fiancée, Leonore Lemon, and a few friends were in the house at the time, reportedly downstairs. Leonore claimed she was in the living room when the shot was fired, but others, including Fred Crane, suggested she may have been much closer. Allegedly, after the gunshot, she ran downstairs repeating, "Tell them I was down here," a line that cast suspicion and has been debated ever since. The death was officially ruled a suicide, but many found the circumstances puzzling. The gun had no fingerprints, no gunpowder residue was found on George's hands, and bizarrely, 2 extra bullets were found on the floor despite no one recalling multiple shots. The fatal bullet was found lodged in the ceiling. There were no signs of a break-in or struggle, yet something didn't add up. Despite the official report, fans and some friends remained skeptical. Leonore later said George had been deeply depressed about his career, unable to escape the shadow of Superman. In a police report, she was quoted saying, "He's probably going to go shoot himself," followed by the gunshot. She allegedly said, "See there, I told you so." George Reeves was laid to rest at Mountain View Cemetery in Altadena, California, yet mystery continued to surround his death. He was posthumously honored with a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame in 1960, and in 1985, DC Comics named him one of the 50 who made DC great. Still, doubts lingered. His mother, Helen Basolo, firmly rejected the suicide ruling and hired famed attorney Jerry Giesler to investigate further. A second autopsy revealed unexplained bruises on George's head and body, deepening the mystery. Though no solid evidence of foul play emerged, Giesler eventually withdrew, accepting the suicide explanation. But many in Hollywood didn't buy it. Actor Rory Calhoun remarked that nobody in the industry believed George killed himself. Other actors like Alan Ladd and Gig Young also expressed doubts. One theory pointed to George's long affair with Toni Mannix, wife of powerful MGM executive Eddie Mannix, as a possible motive behind a more sinister ending. That love triangle introduced the possibility of revenge or cover-up. George Reeves' life was filled with hope, inspiration, and generosity, but his death remains one of Hollywood's enduring and tragic mysteries. In the book Kryptonite by Sam Kastner and Nancy Schoenberger, it's claimed that rumors were circulating about Eddie Mannix being involved with the mafia, leading some to believe that George Reeves may have been killed either to cover up a secret or as an act of revenge. The situation grew even more complex when George ended his relationship with Toni Mannix and got engaged to Leonore Lemon. According to People magazine's June 2025 edition, this unexpected development may have been the spark that ignited an already tense and volatile situation. Today, the mystery surrounding George Reeves's death remains a topic of intense fascination in Hollywood. While some believe he suffered silently, concealing his pain from the world, others insist that the surface story of fame, heartbreak, and betrayal was a mere facade, hiding darker truths behind closed doors. One haunting question still lingers: why did no one truly show up to mourn him? When George Reeves, the beloved Superman, died, many expected a grand Hollywood funeral befitting a legend. But the reality was shockingly different. His farewell on July 1, 1959, at the Wayside Chapel of the Gates Funeral Home in Los Angeles, was a quiet, almost invisible event. Only a handful of close friends, like Noel Neill, Don DeFore, and Gig Young, attended. No big Hollywood names were present, and the media offered barely a mention. Many insiders believe fear played a major role. Reeves's death was surrounded by scandal and whispers of murder, particularly due to his romantic involvement with Toni Mannix, the wife of powerful MGM executive Eddie Mannix, whose rumored mafia connections made the situation even more dangerous. With speculation that Reeves hadn't taken his own life, the atmosphere became one of unease and avoidance. Friends in the industry claimed that not only was attendance low, but it was subtly discouraged. Word had spread that people were better off staying away. Thus, the ceremony became cold, muted, and sterile, a metaphor for how quickly fame can vanish when a star's story turns controversial. It wasn't just grief that kept people away. It was fear, shame, and the pressure to erase a troubling chapter. Hollywood, it seemed, had abandoned its own Superman. The mystery received renewed attention in 2006 with the release of Hollywoodland, a film that reopened old wounds. Ben Affleck portrayed George Reeves, while Diane Lane played Toni Mannix, and Adrian Brody took on the role of fictional private investigator Louis Simo, loosely based on Milo Spirilio, the real detective hired by George's mother. The film explored several theories surrounding Reeves's death, blending fact and fiction. It didn't try to promote one definitive answer, instead presenting multiple possibilities. One theory suggested Leonore Lemon accidentally shot George during a drunken argument. Another pointed to Eddie Mannix ordering a hit in retaliation for Toni's heartbreak. A third theory implied Toni herself was responsible, motivated by jealousy and rejection, and used her knowledge of the house's private entrance to carry out the act. The final and most widely accepted theory proposed that Reeves, overwhelmed by depression and feelings of failure in both his personal life and career, died by suicide. The movie leaned toward the suicide theory, but did so in a way that emphasized the tragedy and complexity of Reeves's emotional life. Adrian Brody's character, initially obsessed with chasing fame, ultimately found the case so devastating that it forced him to reconsider his own values, leading him to step away from the spotlight and focus on his family. In a nod to his legacy, George Reeves made a brief CGI appearance in the 2023 DC film The Flash. While intended as a tribute, Many fans felt uneasy about seeing a computer-generated version of a man whose life ended in such tragic and unresolved circumstances. The tribute, though well-meaning, seemed to clash with the complicated truth behind the actor who first gave life to Superman on screen. George Reeves's life was filled with dramatic highs and heartbreaking lows. He pursued his dream with charisma, talent, and a deep desire to be more than just the man in the cape. He wasn't just Superman. He was a man who played guitar, sang, toured, and strived to prove he had more to offer. He was kind, generous, and down-to-earth. Yet behind the iconic smile was a man who often felt trapped, defined by one role and unable to break free from its shadow. His story isn't just about how he died, it's about how he lived under the weight of public expectations and private despair. The cheers, the smiles, the cape, all were only part of the picture. The rest was filled with silence, complexity, and a deep longing for purpose. Today, George Reeves continues to be remembered not just because of the mystery surrounding his death, but because he represented something real and relatable, a man trying to matter. A man who, despite fame, often felt unseen. His story touches fans even now, decades later, because it reflects the universal struggle for identity, acceptance, and meaning. Perhaps the most powerful legacy he left behind is the truth that even those who feel invisible can still be remembered, still honored, and still matter. Thank you for exploring George Reeves's story with us. His life was a journey of highs and lows, dreams and disappointments, but his legacy lives on as Superman and as a man who wanted more. If this story moved you, please like the video, and for more deep dives into Hollywood's untold stories and legends, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Until next time, take care, and remember, not all heroes wear capes.